Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in, shall we? If you're a student who has ever felt, just average, or if you've been completely defeated by low marks even after putting in hours and hours of work, then this study analysis is built specifically for you. It is incredibly frustrating to be labeled as weak when you know deep down you are really trying your best. Actually, there's this great example from the movie Hitchkey. It's about a student who was called weak their entire life, but the exact moment they found the right learning method, boom, they became the class topper. That is the exact kind of transformation we're looking at today. We're going to unpack the actual science of learning to help you outsmart the exam system and move way beyond average.
Picture this. You're sitting right there in the exam hall. The clock is ticking loudly, and suddenly, your brain just completely freezes. You're sitting there telling yourself, I studied everything, but why on earth can't I remember the answers? It literally feels like short-term memory loss. You put in the hard work, you read all the chapters, but when it's showtime, the information just vanishes. I completely empathize with this. We've all been there, and it's a terrible feeling. But as you'll see in just a moment, it is entirely preventable.
Now here is something absolutely crucial I want you to let sink in. You aren't lazy, and you're definitely not weak. You are literally just using the wrong system. For years, you might have believed that your low marks were because you just weren't smart enough or disciplined enough. But the truth? Your struggles stem from poor study methods, not a lack of capability. It is time to stop punishing yourself, and instead, let's fix the system you're using to process all that information.
To fix that system, here's our roadmap for today. First, wrong system, not your fault. Second, the Feynman technique for simple explanation. Third, the Pomodoro technique for smart focus. Fourth, spaced repetition to beat the forgetting curve. And finally, not defeat, only learning.
All right, let's get right into part one. Wrong system, not your fault.
Look, we have to acknowledge that sitting with a textbook for hours on end without a solid strategy is just a deeply flawed system. Both neuroscience and learning science agree on one golden rule. If you cannot understand a concept well enough to explain it simply, you haven't truly learned it. Just sitting there staring at text does not magically equal knowledge. Understanding a concept, rather than just passively reading it, is the absolute bedrock of remembering it later.
Moving on to part two, the Feynman technique and the power of simple explanation.
This method is named after the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman, and it's all about taking complex ideas and making them incredibly simple. Now, why do we need this? Because of a sneaky cognitive trap called the illusion of competence. Have you ever highlighted a page in bright neon colors and felt this little rush of dopamine? It feels productive, right? Your brain tricks you into thinking, I know this perfectly, but honestly, it's just an illusion. Come exam day, when you have to actively recall that exact information without the book in front of you, you blank out. Traditional reading is passive. It sets a trap that you usually only discover when it's way too late.
So, how do we break this illusion? We follow the steps of the Feynman technique. First, pick a topic, say photosynthesis or supply and demand, and read it thoroughly. Make your notes. But here is where the magic actually happens. Put those notes away and explain the concept out loud. A really fun and highly effective way to do this is to imagine a ghost friend sitting right across from you. Just look right into their imaginary eyes and teach them the concept as if they were a little kid. As you teach, you're inevitably going to hit a wall. You'll stumble or forget a crucial step. That's step 3. That hesitation reveals the exact gap in your knowledge. Finally, step 4. Go back to your notes, relearn that specific missing piece, and explain it again until it flows seamlessly.
Think about the difference here between rote learning, just blind memorization or rata, and true conceptual learning. If you just memorize a math formula, your brain basically freezes like ice the minute an exam question introduces even a slight twist. But if you've built a solid foundation using the Feynman technique, if you deeply understand how and why that formula was created, your foundation is rock solid. You won't panic under pressure because you actually understand the mechanics behind the whole thing.
Let's jump to part 3, the Pomodoro technique and smart focus.
If you sit down to study but immediately lose focus, you probably just think you're undisciplined, but science actually says otherwise. Research shows that the human brain only performs at its absolute peak capacity in short, manageable bursts of about 25 to 30 minutes. So the problem isn't laziness at all, it's attention fatigue. When you tell your brain it has to study for like 6 hours straight, it naturally rebels and shuts down because that timeline just feels mentally exhausting.
The solution for this was developed back in the 1980s by a guy named Francesco Cirillo, and it's called the Pomodoro technique. It is brilliantly simple. You do 25 minutes of intense, deep focus, followed immediately by a 5-minute break. And you just repeat this cycle exactly 4 times. After that 4th cycle, you reward yourself with a much longer break. Why does this work so well? Well, research from the University of Illinois proves that taking these short, structured breaks literally resets your attention. It prevents that dreaded mid-study crash and massively improves your overall performance. Breaking a daunting study session into these 25-minute blocks makes the work feel totally achievable.
All right, next up, part 4, spaced repetition and the forgetting curve.
We need to tackle the ultimate villain here, short-term memory loss right before an exam. Check out this massive 50% drop. Back in 1885, a scientist named Hermann Ebbinghaus discovered something he called the forgetting curve. His research showed that when you learn something new, you will naturally forget 50% of it within just 24 hours if you don't strategically revise it. Literally half of your hard work gone in a single day. So the problem in the exam hall isn't your memory. The problem is simply the timing of your revision. To fight the forgetting curve, we use something called spaced repetition. Instead of reading the same chapter over and over in one day, you space out your reviews. You do your initial study, review it after 1 day, and then again after 7 days. Neuroscience tells us that every single time you force your brain to recall information after a gap, it sends a powerful signal that this data is really important. This method actively strengthens the neural connections in your brain, leading to long-term memory consolidation. Plus, testing yourself like this strips away that fake confidence we talked about earlier. You will truly know what you know.
So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, this sounds amazing in theory, but just how much retention do these scientific techniques actually add compared to my normal last-minute cramming?
Well, let's look at the actual numbers, because they are kind of wild. A study from Washington University showed that students using explanation-based learning, like the Feynman method, saw a massive 40 to 50% increase in retention. On top of that, research from the University of California demonstrated that students using spaced repetition bumped their retention by 30 to 40% compared to crammers. This isn't just nice advice, it's proven scientific leverage that works perfectly with how your brain is naturally wired rather than fighting against it.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Not Defeat, Only Learning. Having the right system is a real game changer, for sure. But your mindset, that's the whole shebang. I want you to remember this powerful quote, "I don't lose, I either win or I learn." Even with the absolute best techniques in the world, there are going to be moments where you might stumble or face a setback. That doesn't mean your brain is broken or that you're flawed. It just means your system needs a tiny bit more fine-tuning. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's literally a stepping stone to it. If you stick to these scientifically proven steps, you are building a foundation that guarantees growth. So I'm going to leave you with this one question. Which of these 3 techniques, the Feynman explanation, the Pomodoro focus, or spaced repetition, are you going to apply to your study system today? It is time to put an end to the late-night panic. Pick a technique, trust the science, and build a system so undeniably strong that you'll never feel that exam hall anxiety again. Keep your curiosity alive, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.